The establishment of a nation often involves sacrifice, often considerable. The question of what might be owed to those who did the sacrificing by generations yet unborn who benefited from it is, as recent events in Bangladesh have demonstrated, a tricky one. Within the last week, riots in Dhaka and elsewhere have seen nearly 200 people killed, hundreds injured, thousands arrested and colossal damage done, including to the fortifications of the prison in Narsingdi, hundreds of grateful inmates of which are now at large, and the headquarters of the national broadcaster, which was set ablaze. Over the weekend, Bangladesh's panicked government declared a nationwide curfew, put the army on the streets with orders to shoot on sight, and unplugged the internet. The catalyst for these protests may seem somewhat niche, verging on the downright obscurantist. There is a wider context which will be along eventually, but first. Last month, a Bangladeshi court reinstated, 6 years after it was scrapped, a quota which guaranteed that a third of the country's public sector jobs would be fenced off for relatives of the veterans of a war which occurred in 1971. This clearly went over pretty badly, especially with people not related to veterans of that war and or who suspected, probably not altogether without reason, that the reintroduced system would be milked by the ruling party, the Awami League, to further tighten their grip on power. If this was the intention of the Awami League and its leader, Bangladesh's long-serving Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, it may yet prove that they have miscalculated.
The reason we are joining the protests is so that if our children have the merit, they will get jobs. But now, children of freedom fighters who have no merit get the job easily.
At which point, we'll be needing some gazing back through the mists of time music.
The Bengalis of East Pakistan have paid a heavy price in blood for trying to break away from West Pakistan and forming the independent state of Bangladesh.
That 1971 conflict has become known as the Bangladesh Liberation War. It was seen at the time as a civil war within Pakistan, though a geographically extremely odd one given that the two entities fighting it were separated by the width of India. One of the many difficulties attendant on partitioning post-colonial India into one largely Hindu state and one mostly Muslim state is that the Muslim populations were concentrated on opposite sides of the continent. These regions became West Pakistan and East Pakistan. This arrangement grew unpopular in East Pakistan, where people felt, and again not without reason, that they were regarded as very much a junior partner by West Pakistan, which was home to the key nodes of Pakistan's political and military power, which in Pakistan have very often been the same thing. A Bengali nationalist movement, the Awami League, budded and declared independence in March 1971. This ambition was stamped on hard by Pakistan, well, West Pakistan, and its East Pakistani collaborators, the Razakars. There was a brutal military blitz and a hideous campaign of terror directed especially at East Pakistan's Hindus, perceived as a treacherous fifth column. Nobody knows exactly how many people were murdered, tortured or raped. The most conservative estimates run long into the hundreds of thousands. Perhaps 30 million were displaced, most fleeing to India. War followed, concluded in the favour of the new nation of Bangladesh after India joined the fight on its side.
In an atmosphere heavy with emotion, the green flag of Bangladesh was raised. In the absence of Sheikh Mujib, captured by the army, it was left to the acting president to make an impassioned appeal to the countries of the world for recognition and help.
From the opinion of the war. So I request my foreign journalists to convey to their respective nation that if liberty has got any sanctity to them, if democracy has got any value to them, as if human dignity has got any sense with them, then I label to the civilized governments of the world, the big and the small power, the Afro-Asian countries and to the European countries, to realize it, to recognize it, to come to our help and to do something positive to elevate the misery of the unfortunate people of Bangladesh.
Since then, those who fought in that war and their descendants have been regarded, not least by themselves, as something of an elite. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was the first president of Bangladesh and was murdered along with Sheikh Hasina's mother and most of her siblings during the military coup of 1975.
It's a very difficult time. When I heard this news, for a few moments I didn't know where I was, how.
The Supreme Court's Appellate Division, according to Article 104, gave a final solution to this quota system.
An amount of backtracking and downclimbing vis-à-vis the veterans' quota now appears underway. Bangladesh's Supreme Court overruled the lower court and has decided that from here on only 7% of civil service jobs will be reserved for protected categories of people. 5% for the relatives of freedom fighters, 2% for members of various minorities, including disabled and transgender people. Protest leaders, in turn, have agreed to a suspension of their activities. As we go to air, some communications have been restored and the curfew is being eased, and the government is promising an inquiry into events and that no legal retribution will be pursued against protesters, though it does appear that many remain in custody. Sheikh Hasina has, during her long spell in power, grown used to adapting with alacrity to tumultuous events. Rowdy, even deadly civil disturbances are not unusual in Bangladesh. Indeed, stramashes of this sort attended her most recent re-election in January, in a vote boycotted by the main opposition parties, who believed the result somewhat preordained.
If any party does not participate in the election, it does not mean that there is no democracy. You have to consider whether people has participated or not. And you know that you mentioned the party, what they did. They set fire, they killed people.
But Sheikh Hasina's generation, who remember the war of 1971, and even the children of that generation, no longer have the numbers. Bangladesh is a young country, with youth unemployment running at around 12.5%, which in a country as populated as Bangladesh is about 18 million frustrated young folk without much in the way of welfare safety net.
I find some of my friends are still depressed because they are unable to find a good job.
These latest protests were about one thing in particular. But they were also, and this is where such eruptions can be dangerous for long-ruling and complacent governments, about everything in general. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Mueller.